Main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 8, Episode 3, Dreams Can Come True.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Dreams Can Come True.
We open at the Cunningham house during breakfast time. Howard has received a long-awaited letter from the Pfister Country Club, letting him know he's being reviewed for membership.
We're going to be interviewed by the membership committee.
Meanwhile, Marion got a phone call about Richie being transferred to an army base in Greenland. Lori Beth runs in, hysterical with joy.
I'm so excited I ran 14 blocks in my pajamas!
She got a letter from Richie asking her to marry him. The Cunninghams are just as happy as she is. There's only one problem.
You'll have to come up here for the wedding because I have no leave for a year.
Lori Beth has to go to Greenland for the wedding, and Richie can't give her the $800 she needs to fly there because a private barely makes enough to live on. Marion says Howard will pay for it with the money they saved up to join the country club, and Howard reluctantly agrees. But Lori Beth refuses. She doesn't want to start her married life in debt, and wants to start her life with Richie self-sufficiently. At Arnold's, Al and Chachi are watching Dreams Can Come True, a show described as housewives talking about all the tragedies of their lives, followed by the audience voting on who has the saddest life, and the winner getting money. Al finds it heartrending.
Dreams Can Come True is the best show on television.
Chachi is less enthused.
What's so great about a bunch of poor housewives describing all the tragedies in their lives, huh?
Fonzie tries to give Lori Beth the money she needs for Greenland, but she once again refuses. While Dreams Can Come True has cut to commercial, Al tries to offer Lori Beth a job as a waitress. The starting salary is $800 a week, and then they can negotiate. Marion enters as the commercial ends.
Howard and I, Dad and I, want you to come for dinner tonight. Well, Al, you can come too.
And Fonzie has the idea of Lori Beth going on the show to win the money. Unfortunately, the show only accepts women who have a husband and children, so Marion volunteers to go on Lori Beth's behalf. Fonzie takes credit for the idea, and Howard won't know what happened because he never watches the show.
He never watches it.
He never watches it.
This is so exciting. Marion on Dreams Can Come True.
A couple days later on the set of Dreams Can Come True, Marion, Al, Lori Beth, Joni, Chachi, and Fonzie arrive. Bobby Burns, the host, goes to greet Marion as the others sit in the audience. Marion explains the situation concisely.
Well, my son was drafted in the army, and then they shipped him out to Greenland, and he wants to marry his girlfriend, Lori Beth, but Lori Beth has got to get a ticket for $800, so that's it.
And Bobby basically calls her boring.
No! Does she have to be on the show?
Yeah, Bobby, she's already booked.
Fonzie says Marion needs to put more theatrics into it, like when she's doing her plays. The show begins, and after a commercial for soap,
We're going to be hearing from our first contestant, Marion Cunningham, after these important words about how to get rid of soap skunk.
Marion is set to be the first to speak. At the Cunningham house, the representatives for the Pfister Country Club are visiting Howard, who claims Marion is at her Tuesday night charity meeting. When asked if his family is the one who sits outside on hot days in a plastic pool, Howard claims no, that's the Burkharts next door.
It's absolutely disgraceful. They're making a mockery out of the whole neighborhood. I'm going to have another talk with them.
What the Pfister Country Club looks for above all else in its members is dignity and the initiation fee. Potsy runs inside, shouting that Marion is on TV and turning it on.
Guess where Mrs. C is?
She's at a charity meeting.
Wrong.
Howard tries to claim Potsy is an underprivileged youth from Burma, but then the show comes on, and there's Marion.
And now a man in uniform in Uncle Sam's army way out there in icy Greenland, risking frostbite to defend this great country of ours, separated from his loved ones for the first time.
Marion's monologue about helping Richie and Lori Beth get married draws tears from the audience, and she sits down. The next contestant is Emily Sitz from Lubbock, Texas, who needs money because her husband is out of work, their house burned down, and both of her parents need an operation.
What little money we had, well, it was in the house at the time of the fire. We was saving that money for little Earl Jr. to go to Rodeo Clown College.
But she lacks Marion's ability to connect with the audience, and she gets no reaction. In the audience, Joni starts to feel guilty, and Marion tells the host that Emily should win. He disagrees and mocks Emily's delivery.
She stood there like a dummy. My husband Earl's out of work.
The next contestant, Helen from Bangor, Maine, lost her husband in a dynamite explosion.
I'm here today because my husband was transporting dynamite when kaboom!
At the end of the show, the applause meter shows that Marion has won by a landslide, but Marion has gained some valuable perspective, and she gives the money to Emily instead.
And you take that little boy and get him into Rodeo College.
Rodeo Clown College.
Oh, yeah.
Back at the Cunningham house, Howard shoves Potsy out. Surprisingly, the country club representatives were impressed by Marion.
Mr. Cunningham, your wife is a remarkable woman. She demonstrated a lot of class.
And they want to recommend Howard for membership. But Howard has also gained some perspective. Now he's going to insist Lori Beth take the money that would have been for the country club and go to Greenland. When Marion gets home, she's horrified that Howard saw the show, until he tells her she was beautiful. Then Fonzie claims that the Tooth Fairy left him $800 and he wants to give it to Lori Beth.
You got $800 for tooth?
Oh, yeah? We're talking a big tooth like a fang, you know?
Howard says he'll be giving Lori Beth the money. And this time, Lori Beth is ready to accept. Emily and Helen had no one to turn to for help, but Lori Beth does. Fonzie still insists on paying for the wedding cake. And in return, Richie and Lori Beth can name their firstborn after him, regardless of if it's a boy or a girl.
Thank you, Peter. That was Dreams Can Come True. It first aired back on November 25th, 1980. Happy Days was followed that night by a new Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls get acquainted with their new neighbors in Burbank and even live through their first earthquake. CBS reran the 1973 classic, A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving.
From soup to nuts, Charlie Brown is cooking up a special treat for Thanksgiving, a fun feast. A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving.
This was followed by another animated special called Thanksgiving in the Land of Oz.
Toto, look! It's the Emerald City! We're back in Oz again!
And NBC had a special called TV Comedy's Greatest Hits, a salute to 30 years of comedy on TV, hosted by Dick Van Dyke, Carl Reiner, and B. Arthur.
From Bilko to Benson, from Kovacs to Coleman.
How long has this been going on?
It's 30 years of TV comedy's greatest hits.
So, Peter, of those choices, what are you watching?
Oh gosh, it's hard to choose between Charlie Brown and B. Arthur. I'm going to go with the latter just because they play a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving like every year. So I have plenty of opportunities to see that.
I would also be tempted by a special hosted by Dick Van Dyke, Carl Reiner, and B. Arthur, all in one, plus all these great clips from classic TV comedies. But I could not turn down the opportunity of animation in primetime in 1980. It was much rarer then than it is now. And I have to check out this Thanksgiving in the Land of Oz. I've never heard of that one, so I've got to see that.
Although I will say that does kind of make me nervous, because it's worth mentioning that L. Frank Baum was super genocidally racist against Native Americans. The idea of combining that with Thanksgiving, sirens are going off in my brain.
Dreams Can Come True was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Rhea Nepes. The most recent of Rhea's episodes that we covered was A Potsy is Born. As for guest stars this week, let's start with Lyle Wagner as Bobby Burns. Lyle was a tanned, muscular actor from Kansas City, Kansas, who became known as television's quintessential male heartthrob in the 1960s and 70s. TV viewers know him best from his long stint on The Carol Burnett Show and as Steve Trevor on Wonder Woman. He was also the runner-up to play Batman in 1966.
It looks black as pitch, Dick. I've been through all my father's old law books, and I don't see we have a leg to stand on.
You might have seen him on Mork and Mindy, That 70s Show, The Golden Girls, Murder, She Wrote, Fantasy Island, Lost in Space, and too many others to count. His movies include the MST3K classic Catalina Caper.
Lyle Wagner's a total jerk, second only to Tommy Kirk.
And the original Gone in 60 Seconds. Lyle will be back on Happy Days as a different character in season 11. He passed away at the age of 84 in 2020. Peter, what did you think of Lyle Wagner as Bobby Burns?
Oh, he's a blast. He's introducing himself to someone who, it turns out, works on the show.
Hi, I'm Bobby Burns. Nice to have you as a contestant on our show.
Bobby, that's our script girl. She's been with us 3 years.
Because he thought she was a contestant. And then he tries to introduce himself to Marion twice. You get the sense that he's just this incredibly callous figure who doesn't really care about anyone who is not him. And then there's just the way that he mocks Marion's story and then Emily after she's rattled off the fact that her life is incredibly tragic. That makes perfect sense because Dreams Can Come True is the kind of show where you have to humiliate yourself on television in order to get something that you need to make your life better. So yeah, he's perfect, both as a character and as an actor.
On The Carol Burnett Show, Lyle Wagner specialized in playing vain, shallow, egotistical jerks and game show hosts.
Now let's meet our swinging bachelor. He's a native Californian who graduated from high school. He's a sports fan and in his spare time visits his relatives.
So Bobby Burns is the kind of role that he was born to play. He's perfect in this. Let's move on to Brad Blaisdell as Lou. Brad was an actor from Baltimore who worked steadily in film and TV from the early 1980s to just a few years ago. He's probably best known for his recurring role as Mike the bartender on Three's Company.
Come and knock on our door.
Come and knock on our door.
We've been waiting for you.
We've been waiting for you.
Where the
This is all hers and his. Three's company too.
TV viewers may have seen him on ER, Criminal Minds, The Mentalist, Small Wonder, Family Matters, Ally McBeal, The Jeffersons, and more. His movies include Clean Slate, The Negotiator, Executive Decision, and Inspector Gadget. He also appeared in a bunch of made-for-TV movies and miniseries about real-life show business figures, including Marilyn, The Untold Story, Sinatra, and The Rat Pack. Brad will be back as Lou in season 10. He died in 2018. Peter, what did you think of Brad Blaisdell as Lou?
He was pretty good. I feel like he wouldn't have been as good if he wasn't part of a duo, but I like that he was the one who was better at feigning humanity.
A lot of vain, idiot characters often have long-suffering sidekicks who have to be slightly smarter than them and figure things out for them. I thought the dynamic between Bobby Burns and Lou was a lot like Zapp Brannigan and Kiff on Futurama.
Oh, yes.
Shall I fire on them now, sir?
Not yet, Kiff. In the game of chess, you can never let your adversary see your pieces.
Oh.
Let's move on to our other contestants. We have Patricia Lentz as Emily Sitz. Today, Patricia is best known as a voice actress. Her credits include Rick and Morty, American Dad, G.I. Joe, Duckman, Ben 10, Frozen, and Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo. But she's done plenty of live-action work as well. Her TV credits include Baskets, Marvel's Runaways. She was Aura.
I think if you like the comic, you're going to love this.
Are you a fan of Marvel?
Yeah. Yeah.
ER, Weeds, 8 is Enough, Gilmore Girls, Bones, and NCIS. Her movies include The Bling Ring and A Dog Year. What did you think of Patricia Lentz as Emily Sitz?
She has a very straightforward delivery. You can tell that she's not trying to milk her tragedy for the audience, even though in this case it would be helpful for her. But I think she does a very good job at gaining sympathy from the real life audience. Because of that, she's contrasted with Marion's deliberately exaggerated theatrics. I feel like that does emphasize the fact that she's a very honest person, as far as we know.
I think Patricia adds something special to this episode with her very deadpan delivery. She speaks in a monotone, and she doesn't change her facial expression at all, and that makes her speech kind of darkly humorous. We also have Catherine Fuller as Helen Hanley. Catherine was an actress from Delaware, Ohio, who worked mostly in the 70s and 80s. Gary Marshall used her on Laverne and Shirley a couple of times. She had recurring roles on Valerie and Days of Our Lives. She was a guest star on Charlie's Angels, Little House on the Prairie, Fantasy Island, Remington Steele, Simon and Simon, Newhart, Starman, and Highway to Heaven. Her movies include Yes, Giorgio and Say Anything, plus a Gary Busey film called Eye of the Tiger. Catherine died in 2012 at the age of 89. What, Peter, did you think of Catherine Fuller as Helen Hanley?
She basically only gets the one line about her husband dying driving a dynamite truck, but goddamn, it's a very, very dark joke and it's hilarious. And her delivery, it's not like Marion's and it's not like Emily's. She just blurts it out. It's great.
Catherine Fuller fully goes for it in her dynamite speech. It also becomes one of the highlights of the episode. We also have our country club couple. Let's start with Jean Byron as Mrs. Corrigan.
Is your family the one who sits outdoors on hot days in a plastic pool?
Jean was an extremely accomplished actress from Paducah, Kentucky, who worked frequently in TV and film in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. She may be best known for playing the mom, Natalie, on the Patty Duke Show in the 1960s.
I think with Kathy here from Europe, Patty would mature a little faster.
Haven't you heard, darling? Girls are influenced by boys.
But she also had recurring roles on Mayor of the Town and Dobie Gillis. Her other TV credits include Columbo, Batman, The Jeffersons, Maude, Ironsides, and The Mod Squad. Fans of 1950s B-movies may know her from such classics as The Magnetic Monster, Voodoo Tiger, Invisible Invaders, and Serpent of the Nile. She's also in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes and There's Always Tomorrow. She died in 2006. Peter, what did you think of Jean Byron as Mrs. Corrigan?
You get the sense that she's the meaner of the two, just by the fact that when her partner is talking about how to be in the Pfister Country Club, you just need dignity, she adds that you need the initiation fee. She seems very practical. Country clubs are just built on privilege and money, and she seems aware of that.
I like how Jean Byron brought out the mercenary side of this Mrs. Corrigan character. I like the moment when they're leaving and she immediately turns on her husband and said,
Milton, you handled that very badly.
And let's end here with Michael Prince as Mr. Corrigan. Michael was an actor from Pittsburgh who maintained a steady presence in TV and film from the mid-1960s to the mid-1990s. Before this, Gary Marshall had used him as a judge in the pilot episode of Mork and Mindy. He also had a recurring role as Dean Perry on The Paper Chase. His other TV credits include Columbo, Little House on the Prairie, The A-Team, The Greatest American Hero, Dynasty, and much more. Toward the end of his career, he was doing voice work on Real Monsters. Michael's movies include Death Wish 2.
Death Wish 2. Wish Death. Death Wish 2. Rated R. Under 17. Not admitted without parent.
3 Days of the Condor, and Two of a Kind, the movie that reunited John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. Michael died in the year 2000. What did you think of Michael Prince as Mr. Corrigan?
I like that he was the kinder, gentler face of unrelenting privilege. To his credit, he was genuinely impressed by Marion doing something good by giving the money she wanted to someone who actually needed it more. I get the sense that in his relationship with his wife, she's the one who wears the pants.
Mr. Corrigan definitely gets led around by his wife in their marriage. I did like that he does show a softer side. They're mercenary and they want the money, and they're putting on this front of being dignified. I thought they were going to turn out to be really mean-spirited and snobby, and that's not the way the episode goes. So I was relieved by that. As for songs this week, there are none. For a second, I thought that the studio organist was playing We're in the Money, but he's not.
Congratulations, Marion. Come on up here. Oh, we've got flowers for you. We've got a crown. And most of all, we've got $800. Come on, all of Marion's up with...
Cultural and historical references this week. Joni asks if Howard has received his Burpee seed catalog. Burpee is a Pennsylvania seed and plant company founded by Washington Atlee Burpee in 1876. The company is famous for selling its products through the mail. Burpee used to be one of America's biggest mail order companies long before the days of Amazon, and they're still in business as of 2022. And yes, you can still order one of their famous catalogs. The Pfister Country Club is fictional. It's one of Happy Days' many, many, many references to the Pfister Hotel in Milwaukee. The U.S. military has one base in Greenland, Thule Air Base, constructed in 1943. The 4th Battalion, 55th Artillery, was stationed there from 1958 to 1965. So this assignment is perfectly plausible. In addition to being a strategic air command installation, Thule was an ideal site to test weapon systems in extreme cold weather. I think that they wanted to have Richie stationed someplace where he could not possibly visit Milwaukee.
I think it was also because they didn't want him to get involved in any actual wars. No Vietnam War for Happy Days.
Joni jokes about Richie sucking blubber.
Now what's he doing? Sucking blubber?
But blubber is a part of traditional Greenlandic cuisine.
Blubber.
Yeah, blubber.
That's what it's called. Blubber.
Right.
The Eskimos eat the blubber.
There are direct flights from Chicago to Greenland, but they take you to Nuuk, which is at the opposite end of the country from Thule Air Base. They're nearly 1,000 miles apart. Thule is highly secretive, and visitors must obtain special permits to be there. I'm not sure where Happy Days is getting that $800 price tag, but that translates to about $7,500 or $7,600 in today's money. Isn't the secrecy of the base a plot point in a future episode? Like, she has to have some kind of special permission to be at the base?
Yes, and that leads to further complications that we won't get into because of spoilers. But yeah, it turns out that this entire episode was kind of pointless, except for confirmation that Lori Beth is going to marry Richie.
Dreams Can Come True is an obvious parody of a real show called Queen for a Day, which started on radio in 1945.
And now, here is candidate number 2. Well, look at that big smile. That's wonderful. I'm glad to see you. Who are you?
I'm Mrs. Vernon Sander.
Mrs. Vernon Sander. You haven't been married very long.
Oh, yes, I have. 15 years.
Is that so?
That version of the show lasted until 1957. The TV version ran from 1956 to 1964, moving from NBC to ABC about midway through. The show was tremendously popular, but drew criticism for exploiting people's hardships. One critic called it tasteless, demeaning to women, demeaning to anyone who watched it, cheap, insulting, and utterly degrading to the human spirit.
That's nitpicking, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what I appreciate about this episode. We're getting just a little glimpse at one of the grosser parts of the mid-20th century, which it usually shies away from. But yeah, this is an episode about the desperate need for money and the need to impress people, and I like that a lot about it.
It is impossible to imagine such a show existing, but it really did. And yes, the winner was determined by an applause meter, just as depicted here. The character of Bobby Burns is a parody of the real-life host of Queen for a Day, Jack Bailey, and if anything, they toned him down for this episode. The real-life Jack Bailey is such a smug, condescending jerk, just talking down to the poor, defeated women who appear on his show.
What do you want if you elect our queen, Mrs. Butler? You're up to bat.
Well, I'd like to have a dehumidifier.
You have to watch a little bit of Queen for a Day just to absorb how awful this show was. And Jack Bailey looks like a cartoon of a used car salesman.
It's kind of like how the show The Crown has to kind of not make the British royal family as evil as it is. It still doesn't really make them look good, but you can tell that they're toning it down considerably, because otherwise people would find it unbelievable.
Fonz claims to have found $800 in his Wheaties. We've talked about Wheaties before. The popular brand cereal debuted in 1924, but they never actually put cash in their cereal boxes.
Yeah, not the best lie, Fonzie.
Fonzie also mentions his Lone Ranger toothbrush.
Anything I got is yours, all right? Except, of course, my Lone Ranger toothbrush, because hygiene's very important to me.
There never was such an item, and even if there were, you shouldn't keep using the same toothbrush for too long a time. On the other hand, there was an official Lone Ranger toothbrush holder that came out in 1938 during the run of the original radio series. These can be fairly easily procured on eBay. Expect to pay about $80 to $90 for one.
Yes, I'm running an ad to sell my hi-fi. Well, I paid $150 worth 3 years ago.
If Lori Beth paid $150 for her hi-fi 3 years ago, that means she paid the equivalent of about $1,400 in today's money. And based on the 60s hi-fi ads that I saw, that was about the going rate. Fonzie calls Bobby Burns a real Momo.
Let me tell you something. Your hero is a real Momo.
Momo is an Italian-American slang term meaning idiot.
All work and more play makes Mo a Mo-Mo.
Howard refers to Potsy as Sabu.
No milk and cookies today, Sabu. But Mr. Singh...
Sabu was an actor from India who shot to fame in the 1930s and 40s after starring in a string of British and American films.
What's your name?
I'm Abu the Thief, son of Abu the Thief, grandson of Abu the Thief, most unfortunate of 10 sons with a hunger that yawns day and night.
His most famous films are The Thief of Baghdad, The Jungle Book, Arabian Nights, and Black Narcissus. Tragically, Sabu died of a heart attack in 1963. This was right after they mentioned Rogers Hornsby, who also died in 1963. Maybe being mentioned by Howard is some kind of death curse. And at the end of the show, Fonz refers to the Tooth Fairy. The Tooth Fairy is a popular mythical figure in Western culture, said to leave coins for sleeping children who have lost their baby teeth. Peter, were you in a Tooth Fairy family?
Yes, but I figured it out pretty early on that she wasn't real. I also figured out that Santa wasn't real when I was like 6.
I think the Tooth Fairy is the easiest one to debunk.
That's because there's so much lore surrounding Santa and to a lesser extent the Easter Bunny. The Tooth Fairy, it's very inconsistent.
Other observations this week. The Cunninghams' total loving acceptance of Lori Beth is a refreshing change from most sitcoms where in-laws are often depicted as the enemy. We don't have to look further than Happy Days itself to see the relationship between Mother Kelp and Howard, but I love how nice they all are to Lori Beth. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I really loved that too. They just immediately accept Lori Beth as a member of their family. They all immediately want to help her in whatever way they can. And for some reason, she just doesn't want their help. And they tell her that they were hoping that Richie would propose to her. Howard and Marion want her to call them mom and dad. It's very, very sweet.
And I think Lori Beth probably would have been very happy living in Milwaukee and probably being close to the Cunninghams. So it's kind of sad that she doesn't get to. Richie takes her across the country.
Thanks a lot, Richie.
Lori Beth's stubborn refusal of help from everyone in her life reminded me of the parable of the drowning man. The point of the parable is that if people in your life are trying to help you, don't be too proud to accept help. And that's basically the lesson that Lori Beth learns.
We all need somebody to lean on.
That and other people have it harder than you and they don't have anyone to turn to for help. So if someone is offering to help you, accept it. Don't be a dumbass.
Yet again, WZAZ is the name of the local TV station. Happy Days remembers its own past. The Cunninghams have visited WZAZ many times.
WZAZ in Chicago, where disco lives forever.
And Howard's easy chair returns at the beginning of this episode. Howard even sits in it, but it's gone by the end.
Aww. Maybe he moved it out because he didn't want the country club people to judge him. There are a lot of jokes throughout the show about how out of shape Howard is, and I don't like them. I think they're in very poor taste. I think they're fatphobic and kind of cruel, but he's got to be in pretty good shape if he can move an easy chair.
So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
I really like the outfit that Bobby Burns was wearing. Like you said, it has used car salesman vibes, not to the extent that it does for his real life counterpart, but enough that you get the sense that this guy's kind of a slick phony. Do not trust this man.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
I liked this episode a lot more than I expected. I think because it's addressing this weird, awful thing from the time period, which Happy Days usually doesn't do. Women used to go on television to humiliate themselves in front of the entire viewing audience for the desperate hope of getting something to help them out because they couldn't go anywhere else because of the incredibly capitalistic, individualistic time period they lived in. Where's the safety net to help Emily Sitz or Helen? I also like the fact that Marion realized that her taking advantage of her acting ability was wrong. Yeah, she wants to help Lori Beth, but goddamn, Emily Sitz needed it more. And I also like that Howard also realized that he was being a dick. No, helping out Lori Beth is more important than wanting to hobnob with rich elitist people. So I felt like that meshed thematically nicely with the Dreams Can Come True plotline. And I also like that Lori Beth came to the realization that, yeah, it's okay to accept help from the people who love you. I do feel like this episode could have done more with Lori Beth. Spoilers for the rest of the season, but Lori Beth really gets underutilized. I do think this episode could have explored why exactly it is that she doesn't want to accept help from the Cunninghams. It feels kind of out of nowhere, but it does kind of work to build Lori Beth's character a bit. She wants to be independent. She doesn't want to be beholden to anyone when she's starting this next phase of her life.
I was basically satisfied with Lori Beth's explanation of why she didn't want to take the money. She didn't want to start out her marriage in debt or obligated to the Cunninghams in any way. Anybody who's ever had to borrow money from relatives knows what an embarrassing thing that can be and how it kind of changes the power dynamic in any relationship. And maybe she sees that as a problem in the future. I will say that Dreams Can Come True was the first season 8 episode that I really enjoyed. I think it's a good ensemble episode. I like the parody of Queen for a Day, a show that is sorely in need of parody. I like the fact that Lyle Wagner comes in as this sleazy game show host. I like that the Cunninghams and Fonz and Al and everyone in Lori Beth's life tries to help her. And ultimately the story is about her learning to accept help from someone else. So yeah, I don't have any serious complaints about Dreams Can Come True. This was actually, I thought, a great improvement over the first couple of episodes of the season. There are some Lori Beth showcase episodes coming up, but I think this is one of the better Lori Beth-centric episodes. So I was happy to see her at least get some more playing time. I don't even think she got on camera during Live and Learn. So I was happy to get a little bit more of her character. Overall, I think all the guest stars did great jobs with their roles. So I was very happy with it. I would say this is definitely one that people should check out. So Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysofours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysofourspodcast@gmail.com. So Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, we finally meet our replacement for Richie in the category of Square to Bounce Off of Fonzie in Happy Days in Hello, Roger.
Hello, Mabel.
Hiya, fellas.
I am legitimately stoked for this. So see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Get